Okay, well, in today's episode, Barb and I will be talking about something deeply personal for the two of us. And I will be totally honest. This topic is a little confronting for me because just a month ago, I did not consider menopause to be a leadership conversation. And when Barb and I were doing quite a bit of research on generational differences, this topic came up. And it shocked me because I've spent my career talking about inclusion, performance, and thriving at work. And yet I realized I had internalized silence around this topic. And this is the part that is quite personal because I am in menopause. So, why is this? I realize that it has never been discussed in a professional setting, at least not in my personal experience. So, somewhere along the way, I unconsciously accepted the idea that menopause is just not part of leadership. It wasn't on the list. And that was quite stunning to me. It was very self-confrontational. So let's call it what it is. Let's name it. So when we hear the word menopause or you say the term menopausal women, what comes to mind? What images do you see? Today, we're going to be unpacking those assumptions, stereotypes, and we would like to rewrite them. We are reframing menopause, not as a pause, and definitely not as a decline or discomfort based on my personal experience as well as Barb's. We want to present it as a power phase. It's a chapter of leadership maturity, deep expertise, emotional intelligence, resilience, and influence. And this conversation feels like it's long overdue. I am Cecilia Young.
And I'm Barbara Clifford.
Let's
Cecile,
dive right in.
yeah, well, let's dive right in. You talked about with such honesty and vulnerability your discomfort, Cecilia, about approaching this subject. And I've got a confession that I feel the same way. And just as you were talking then with that introduction, I realized that menstruation and menopause have culturally been such a taboo yet sacred and special thing, right? But it's still shrouded in secrecy. And I think we now have menstrual leave in workplaces for some organizations, but yet we still haven't brought on board the things with menopause, which we're going to talk about. And my confession is I probably didn't want to face it. I didn't want to confront it. Even though I'm perimenopausal, I went along to an event which was really mind-blowing and eye-opening for me. But truth be told, I probably wouldn't have sorted out. The reason I went is to support my colleagues. And I'm so glad that I went because it so informed me and triggered these conversations that you and I have having, which we probably wouldn't have done, Cecilia. We probably wouldn't have had any kind of open conversation because it's just that thing over there that everybody else talks about. And I don't feel like I need to talk about it. Would you agree?
Definitely. There's definitely a stigma around this topic. And I'll be the first to confess, I don't think I've ever mentioned it to my peers, and definitely not in a work context.
And that raises my first question I want to unpack with you as well, Cecilia. Why do women feel the pressure to hide menopause symptoms at work? And what does that actually signal about the workplace culture?
Well, to answer that, I want to let you know that I did quite a bit of research. I read some reports and I found this amazing resource, the Menopause Foundation of Canada. And I was surprised to look at the statistics. And I looked at the research and then I looked at my own experience, and there's no surprise. I mean, so many women hide their symptoms at work because silence has just been the norm. This stigma, I definitely don't want to announce to the workplace that I am going through this phase because for some reason, over the years and through my social conditioning, through my years in corporate, I've just had this image that if someone is in this phase, they are on their way out. They are in their decline. And it also signals like a woman who is moody and is stereotypical. I'm going back to the assumptions, right? That it's stereotypical. And when I asked you to picture a woman in her menopause years, what would you picture? Just someone who is uncomfortable, someone who is the symptoms that are well known, brain fog, hot flashes. So you don't want to be associated with that. So in workplaces where women feel they have to power through to be taken seriously, there's a fear that acknowledging hormonal changes will be viewed as weakness, or worse, that they are past their prime, which is definitely the case for me. And we live in a culture where we live in a world where youth is celebrated. And and if somebody says, "Oh, you look younger than your age," that's a huge compliment. Whereas if you look back in history, the elders were actually the most respected in society.
That's
It's just
right.
it's flipped around where now we're celebrating youth. It, uh, we don't want to acknowledge that we are in our 50s and worse in our 60s and 70s in the workplace.
Mm.
So this isn't a hypothetical concern. So as I said, I looked at quite a bit of research, and there was an extremely detailed report by Deloitte. It's a global survey on women at work by it's their fifth year by Deloitte, and they surveyed 7,500 women from 15 countries. And it shows that women hesitate to disclose their health challenges, including menopause, because they fear negative career consequences
Yep.
or stigma from their leaders and colleagues. And that goes back to our biology. We're hardwired to want to belong. We don't want to be excluded. And we definitely don't want for these stereotypes to be placed upon us. So, of course, I personally will attest to this. I'm not going to announce it, I'm going to keep it to myself. So, then when you combine that with gendered ageism, where women over 50 already face assumptions about their relevance and energy, we create a culture where highly experienced leaders feel they must remain silent to survive. Now, I don't know this from direct experience. As I said, I've never discussed this in the workplace before. Now I am so curious about speaking to those leaders that I worked with for many, many years, specifically on this topic. And I bet you, Barb, there's going to be like floodgates. There's going to be so many emotions and opinions and assertions around this. So I'm so glad we are finally having this conversation. We're not the first, obviously. There are many resources out there, but I want to just bring back to the reality here. Women
Well,
aged 40 plus, they make up of 25% of the global workforce. Okay, women age 40 and above. And they are a powerhouse workforce segment, truly. And this age group of 45 to 55 are the fastest growing segment. So when women are feel the pressure to hide what is a natural life transition, we're not protecting for professionalism. We're actually shrinking the talent pipeline. So menopause isn't the problem. I think it's our perception of it and the lack of honest, open conversations about it. And it needs to be brought to the attention of DEI initiatives, because now we have parental leave, we have a lot more open and welcoming discussions around differences in the workplace. This is another one. It's not marginalizing a group, but it's saying that it is a reality and we want to acknowledge it.
yeah. And so, and the interesting thing in terms of what we're talking about in the way that perceptions have changed. So you said that we're in a society that prioritizes youth. And I think there's something in when we talk about what that signals, what menopause signals. So it is, for me, coming to the realization that I don't have that youth. My body is not what it was. My appearance, my all of those things was not what it was through my 30s and my 40s. I had my babies in my early 30s. So there's something about that being fertile, right? Being still having the capacity of that those power years when you were at your fittest, your healthiest. And so you start to come to a realization that you're going through a change, that you're not that person. And I think when you hit perimenopause or when you are in menopause, then that is the sign. That is the signal. And it's kind of a grieving, isn't it, of something that's finishing. However, what we've got to recognize and what we've lost is it's the beginning of something new. And they always used to be maiden, mother, crone. These were those significant things that happened in a woman's life cycle. So when you start to menstruate, that's when you're the maiden, the young maiden. When you have, for some women, and not all women, but traditionally when you're having children, that's when you're in the mother phase. And then the crone is the wisdom one. Traditionally, senior women in so many cultures are the healers because they bring with them a lifetime of knowledge and experience and a holistic approach to problems to be able to solve the ails in the community. And what's really interesting around the 14th century, particularly in Europe, is that there was a bit of propaganda from the church when the church was absolutely in power with kings and queens and Henry VIII and all of that. And the men were the academics in church. The women were a threat to that. And so there was a bit of a propaganda about witchcraft, but the witches were actually the healers. So in Macbeth, where it's hubble bubble, toil and trouble, eye of newt, the eye of newt was actually not an eye of a lizard. It was a plant that had a little bud on it, which is called the eye. A donkey's ear was a leaf of a plant that looked like a donkey's ear. And there was all the medicinal things and the knowledge and the wisdom that women had, that was threatening let's use leeches and bleed you and stick a pipe up your backside and smoke, stick smoke up your backside. Like crazy things that people were doing in terms of modern medicine and poo-pooing the beautiful wisdom of these crones. And if we fast forward it to now, once again, we're losing, as you've said, this great wisdom that is not being nurtured and preserved, that is potentially leaving the workforce. In Australia, when I attended this workshop, I was surprised to find out that 1 in 4 women who reach menopause in the workforce leave. They leave. And what I found in talking to lots of different women is that
Or they take themselves off the leadership track because
yeah.
of the fear of the demands of the job and because the symptoms they fear will be holding them back.
And also, I think what some of the testimonies that I heard from different women and from the research was that women did not realize that it wasn't necessarily something wrong with them, but it was symptomatic of menopause. So they thought they were, for example, being overly emotional, or they didn't have it anymore because they had brain fog, or that they were losing it. And so they felt like they were no longer viable in that kind of environment because they were not aware that it was actually symptomatic of menopause and that there are ways to work around that, and we can work around it in the workplace, or find ways to accommodate that into the working world rather than going, I'm broken. There's something wrong with
Mhm.
me. I'm done. I need to leave. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, like I said, I discovered a lot of interesting statistics and information through my research. But I'm curious, Barb, you said that you would not have chosen to attend this workshop. So, what was the biggest shift for you as a result of joining? And aside from the information that you received, what was the biggest change in you?
I feel the biggest change for me was to start talking about it, which is why I started
Mm,
talking to you about it. And
yes.
I've started to have conversations with women at different networking events, particularly senior women. There's a lot of women that I'm networking with that are in my age group. In fact, I'm even having conversations with men now. I attended a leadership function 2 weeks ago, and I knew the person who was the keynote speaker, and it was a small group of people in this networking event, and I was the person that was asking questions in the room to trigger some conversation. And I said to him afterwards, there was a couple of questions I wanted to ask you that were a bit curly, but I didn't want to put you off guard. And I can't remember what I said to him, but it was something around menopause. And so
Mhm,
talking about the impact of menopause and what does that mean from a leadership landscape in the workplace. And he was really embracing and open to that conversation. And we had a really thoughtful conversation around the topic, which we probably would not normally do. And it's only because people had started talking to me about it that I started to talk about it as well. And that was exactly what he said. We need to eliminate the shame and just start talking
mhm.
about it. And what does it
Yes.
mean in the workplace?
Yes, because it is shrouded in mystery, to be honest, until I started digging and looking up the research. Honestly, and as I said, in my entire career, I had never come across any materials and had never had a conversation in the office around this topic.
Exactly. And I think even talking about menstruation in the office, going, "Oh, I've got my period and I'm really uncomfortable today." Do women feel comfortable? Sure, they would probably feel comfortable to talk about that with other women, but would they necessarily feel comfortable to talk about that with a man in the
Hmm.
office? And so the same would go again for menopause. Even so, I was at a function the other night and it was very hot, and there was a lot of senior women fanning themselves, and both men and women were saying menopause. They were okay to having a hot flush, and I was like, no, I'm actually just really hot. But there
Hmm.
was an empathetic approach in this professional work environment, and people felt safe and comfortable to ask that. Like hot flushes is one that seems to be one that people are open to talk about now. Yeah, it's a
Mm.
symptomatic
Well,
of
I'm very
menopause.
grateful. I'm very grateful to you for bringing this topic up, for bringing this to my attention, and for us to be having a conversation today. And like I said, I had never considered it a month ago, and now I am so invested. I'm so interested because it affects me personally.
Yes. It affects everybody, person, or every female that is going through it. It obviously affects them
Hmm.
personally. What I found really interesting in starting to talk to you, Cecilia, because initially the conversations that I was having with women around this, and particularly at the workshop, was one of, I don't know how to frame this, but it was almost a disadvantage of disability, right?
Yes,
One of the
yes,
things that I thought was a great idea was having a menopause champion in the workplace. So somebody you could go and talk to around different things that you can utilize within the workplace to accommodate any challenges you might be facing. And just having someone that's nominated in the workplace to do that. However, in talking to you, you were
mhm,
going, why does this have to be doom and gloom? And you said, like, I don't even
yes,
like the word menopause. It's,
yes,
yes, it's a pause.
exactly,
And you said there's the word
exactly.
men in it. And I was like, I'd never
Yes.
even thought about that. Why does it have to be, oh,
Yes,
we support you, you poor thing? Why isn't it a celebration of congratulations?
exactly.
You've passed
Yes,
over into the wisdom, you're passing over into the wisdom phase. Let's celebrate you, matriarch of this industry. You are the person that has had a legacy of work and bring with you a legacy of knowledge. And now it's time for you to sit on your throne and share your wisdom and be the oracle that we go to for mentorship, guidance, or knowledge. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Because that is definitive. Like if you are in this phase in your life, then you come with the experience.
Yes. Yes.
That is clear. And I thank you for bringing that up. And it's because when I was reading the reports, when I was reading the research, a lot of it was around how workplaces are not menopause friendly. And what that means is offices and accommodations needed to be made for menopausal women with symptoms. Now, I get that there are symptoms that can be debilitating, but what if there are no symptoms? What if it's just in it only affecting a certain percentage of women in this age group? But
Yeah.
let's not take away the years of experience they have. So that's why I wanted an opportunity to rebrand it. And instead of saying we need to make accommodations, we need to have open discussions, which I totally agree on, we also want to look at let's focus on the benefits. Let's focus on the value of what this demographic brings to the workplace. And there are many, and I could make a huge case for that. So I would like to discuss both, but I want to present it as an opportunity.
Mm.
And for a lot of organizations looking at their leadership pipeline, let's look at, not that they've been overlooked, but let's really focus on this segment because you're looking at the emotional intelligence, you're looking at the years of experience, you're looking at a different phase in life. You said that you had your babies in your 30s, and you're now at a phase in your life where they're adults, they are launched in the world. So your attention and your focus and your priorities are different. And you're going
Yes.
to bring a different level of energy to your work. Now, let's capitalize on that. How exciting.
That's right. So
And
I don't have, like you said, I'm not going on menstrual maternity leave. I'm not having to have do school pickups or drop-offs and that interfering with work. I'm not going to have to stay home because my kids are sick anymore because my children are adults. And for most women that are going through menopause, not all, but for most, that's where they're at in their life with their, if they do have children. For those that perhaps some women my age are grandparents and they have grandparent responsibilities and picking up kids
Mhm.
from school or whatever, but I think there's a good majority that probably don't. And so we are a huge asset in just in that in alone in the workforce where our obligations aren't the same as young people entering into the workforce.
Yes, yes. And I definitely support accommodations and flexibility for working mothers. Like you were a working mother, and it was difficult to balance all of that while juggling a full-time job. And I definitely feel in the workplace as much flexibility as possible for every age group,
Mm.
not
And
just not just working parents. Yes.
And if there was someone like me in the workforce and a working mum, chances are I'm familiar with the work that that working mum is doing. Imagine this, a world, because was my reality, but it was so unique and so rare. So when my children were babies, I was back in the workforce, but I was able to work from home. I was able to take my babies into work and just have them in the office with me. Now, I had a really amazing workplace where that felt normal, and both men and women were very accommodating. They would take the baby, whatever. Now, imagine if there's a couple of menopausal women who are in the workplace are
Mhm.
going, let me
Mhm.
take that baby for you. You
Yeah.
know, so I'll take that baby while you go in that meeting or answer the
Yes.
call. I've got it covered for you. And they also know the nature of the work, what that industry requires, so they can be a support person to that young mum in the workplace as well. And I feel like I had that. May not have been menopausal women, but it was senior women that have had their babies,
Mm.
who were able to support me with my babies in the workplace. So what an extraordinary situation. Wouldn't in a new world, wouldn't that be
Yes.
awesome to have that kind
Yes.
of environment?
Yes. Wow. Wow. What a dream, actually.
It was a dream for me when I was in the workplace, and it made a huge difference to my to my children, I think, as well. They gradually transitioned into childcare when they were about 2 or 3, which was really important for that socialization.
Mm,
But I had all of the support mechanisms, and it also meant the work really got the best of me. They got everything and a loyalty from me because of it,
mhm,
because they were
mhm.
so supportive to me, a great loyalty. So it should be the same way for menopausal women as well, that great loyalty because they're being accommodated and contributing to the wisdom and the knowledge and the work that happens within the workplace.
Mm,
So, and I guess the interesting thing is too is to go, you'd mentioned the research about all of these things that had to, like it's
mhm.
a terrible disadvantage. But what are, if we were embracing and accommodating, what are your ideas, Cecilia, around what that might look like?
Well, based on the surveys and what women are asking for, number one is flexibility. So you brought it up as well, the flexibility to work from home and the flexibility to determine their own hours. That was number one. A couple of other accommodations to make the workplace more menopause friendly. Now, these are more conditions in the office, like more temperature control, easier access to the washroom. And there was one article talking about menopause pods. And I thought this was an interesting one because I don't know if you want to shine a light on like this particular segment needing to go into a pod to rest.
Oh,
I,
that's the menopausal women in the pod. Don't go over there. Don't go there.
because they need to cool off and they have ventilation in there. So I thought that was odd. And I don't think it was recommending it, but just mentioning it this as a possibility. So I know for a fact that if I was in that workplace, I do not want a special area that's designed for me to go and cool off. I
You
don't
just
I
go
don't
and cool
want
off. You're menopausal, Cecilia. Go in the pod. Just go and cool down. And you'd be going, it's not
to
my menopause. It's you, you asshole.
fashion. Like I don't want that red light shining on me, going and marginalizing my symptoms and the place I am in life even more glaringly. So I don't know if that is the solution. What I did recognize in the research is that we want to start having conversations. And like you said, you had this interesting conversation with that man at the workshop. Just start talking about it. And in fact, the research has shown that men are interested. They don't want to be excluded because they have wives, they have mothers, they have daughters. So they are very invested in this topic.
What was that term? Oh, I can't remember it. There was a term, metrosexual, the metrosexual man. Do you remember
Yes,
that? So it was the
yes.
man who was really embracing and understanding and in touch with his emotions and feelings and women. And I think there's a level of men also who feel um, emancipated is not the word, but empowered by understanding women. So, not
Mhm,
understanding women from the point of view of seducing them, but to be able to embrace everything that a woman is. And in doing that, they do definitely become more attractive. They
mhm,
are someone that really understands a woman is definitely more attractive. Now, isn't that an interesting thought, Cecilia, in the workplace? If you've got a male leader who goes, I empathize with your menopause. I understand this may be happening. I've done some research on it and I've thought, what's happening for you? And where are you at? Are you perimenopausal? Are you menopausal? Imagine a man having, gosh, it might be inappropriate even, but why does it need to be inappropriate? Um, to be able to have that open conversation. Now, interestingly, at this menopause event that I went to, there was a naturopath and there's also somebody who's an expert in HR. So it was very interesting. So one was talking very much about the clinical medical experience, but the other one was talking from an industrial relations point of view. And one of the questions that I raised um, in that workshop was the appropriateness of asking a question. So, for example, with the training that I do around appropriate workplace culture, what's okay, what's not okay in the workplace, we talk about one of the conversations we'll have is around sexuality. Is it okay or not to ask someone in the workplace if they are gay? And the overall theory around that is no, it's okay for someone to bring it up, but it's not okay to ask somebody about their sexual practice, orientation, what they do on the weekend, any of those things. And so in that context, I said to this trainer, then is it okay to ask someone if they're menopausal or if they're perimenopausal, or is that offensive? Isn't that an
Mhm.
interesting thing? Like, is it you want to do it from a position of care, but it could also be interpreted as offensive.
Yes, yes, as ageism.
Could potentially.
Gendered ageism. Yes.
It could be interpreted as
Yes,
that. So if I go,
yes.
Cecilia, are you menopausal? Like, can you imagine in the workplace?
There's apparently a male version of it, and I did not do the research, so I am not in a position to talk about it. But it was mentioned that there is the equivalent on the other side.
There would have to be because for women, I mean, obviously the side effects are quite significant. And this is based on what I've been educated on, but obviously the estrogen levels are dropping. So and that our menstruation stops and all of those impacts and the hormonal impacts on our body. Surely men go through the same thing with a drop of testosterone level. What impact does that have in their well-being, in their physiology? What side effects do they have as a consequence of that? Is it as significant? Does it need to be considered?
Hmm. Yes. So I'm interested to hear what the doctor had to say at this workshop because based on what I've been listening to and reading, we are living longer and women outlive men, as you know, the statistics show. And so women can be expected to stay in the workplace beyond their 70s. Now,
Mm.
that is quite an interesting number because if you're looking at a woman in her 50s, I still have 20 years left in the workplace and I can contribute greatly to the organization, especially in terms of leadership. I know you brought up earlier that there is this perception that when you are in this phase of life, in the menopausal phase, your energy wanes, your focus is different. But I will speak personally that my energy has never been better, actually. My energy today is far better than 20 years ago. And it's because I take care of myself. I don't feel like I am waning in my years. My focus is sharper than ever. So this is a prime time for me. And I have many more years left.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I'm not feeling this. I'm perimenopausal, and there's some things that tell me that I'm symptomatic of that, particularly around my cycle. But all the other things are not happening for me. Same thing in terms of energy, hot flushes, mood swings, any of those things. I don't think any of that is any different. I will say weight, dropping the weight. I definitely can't drop it like I used to when I was younger. But it was a naturopath, not a doctor in this workshop. But she's also informed me is the relationship between cortisol and weight retention and
Mhm.
menopause. When you've got those three things in combination, they have a different result. And so this is why I think talking to a naturopath is really beneficial because it's just a shift in the combination of things that you're doing. So for me, it's this prescription of taking a lot more magnesium in my diet, having it at night, so I'm getting a better sleep. I love being high energy, right? Like I'm not losing energy. I love operating at that level. However, I've become very familiar with having a lot of cortisol in my system. Cortisol and menopause don't marry well together, which is part of there's that, and I don't know the medical stuff in great detail, but there's a correlation between that and the weight retention. So if I put more magnesium into my system, and the science is there in terms of the impact it has on your cortisol levels and stress, then I'm probably going to do better at managing my weight. And also, which is really interesting, is the muscle stuff. So we know as women get older that the more weight bearing and weightlifting that we do, the stronger our bones are because we
Mhm.
start to not retain as much calcium. And so the if you are doing a lot more exercise, then you are turning the any protein. So I'm doing ketogenic, the protein will get burnt off with the muscle that you need to use the protein to build muscle. And the cortisol will release it as well. Like if you lower the cortisol levels, it will allow you to burn more protein to lose weight, and magnesium helps drop the cortisol level. If that all makes sense. So it's really interesting for me to understand that going, well, menopause is this new person in the party room. We've got all these things happening in the party, and oh, hello, menopause, welcome. Don't you offer a different dynamic
Mhm.
into the way all these things have been working together, and now you've just entered the room. Hello.
Mhm. Yes, yes, because we've never entered this phase before.
That's right. It's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
new. This is new.
Yes.
What does this look like? What does it mean? And I guess the same thing as we entered into menstruation, it was the same experience in terms of all those hormonal changes and those ups and downs and changes in our body. And now this is happening again, but in a different
Hmm.
way.
Yes, yes. Well, like I said, or like you said earlier, I would like to rebrand it. Is there another term that we could use for it? Because I've been playing around with the power years, the power shift, the wisdom years. I don't know if the word menopause is doing what it actually is a lot of justice. And we could look up the Latin root, like what obviously it means pause of menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
But because of the connotation it has, I am very interested in seeing how we can rebrand it.
And it needs to be something like a gateway into a new world. It's like
Mhm.
you've graduated into another dimension of wisdom. That's
Mm.
that's perhaps how we need to look at it. How can we utilize that? And perhaps, perhaps if it does make our brain foggy, it does make us slow down, it's our body forcing us to stop and be mindful and reflective, which is where we could be in our power. That mindfulness and that open-mindedness and reflection of all the data and information in our workplace that gives us the opportunity to make decisions or offer advice or think differently about things. Perhaps it's nature's way of getting us to stop, slow down, think, assess, and utilize all that wisdom.
Actually, you brought up a really good point, and that is this phase, it is literally nature's way of telling us to slow down. And that's why certain percentage of women experience the symptoms to the degree that it affects their capacity, it affects their capability at work. And this is the percentage that actually wants to slow down.
And so, if women are in that menopausal phase, this is an opportunity for organizations to go, if this woman isn't in a leadership position or hasn't transitioned into the workplace to do things differently, now's the time. What have we not done to support a woman in this workplace to reach
Yeah.
that level? How do we capitalize on that rather than accommodate that? like we said
Yes,
before.
yes.
How do we go, right? She's ready to move into that, like you said, that wisdom phase. We need to take advantage of that rather than seeing it as a disadvantage.
Yes. And not looking at as providing extra resources or accommodation, but looking at just providing support because it's a leadership accelerant. I like that
Yes.
word.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yes. And the narrative flips because now we're not tiptoeing around the topic. We're saying that women actually are reaching this peak and they need some very unique support and services.
I just
But
thought, yeah.
once, yeah, they can get through this period, and we're not going to make it. We're not going to stigmatize it anymore. We're not going to hide it. We're not going to be silent about it. We're actually going to discuss it very openly and celebrate it.
You just made me think, and I had a little giggle to myself. Imagine if, when in the workplace, if women reached menopause, that you actually have a celebration. You go, congratulations, Cecilia, you're menopausal. Welcome. You've graduated into a level of hierarchy that puts you into the wisdom space, and it's such an it's such an asset to have you in the workplace. Even though it may not mean that you get
Hallelujah. Yes.
a pay rise or whatever, but you've graduated into the crone. Wow,
Mm,
we've got a crone. I still don't like the word crone either, but we've got one of the wisdom women. We've got a wisdom woman in our
incredible,
workplace.
incredible, Barb. And
Wouldn't
not
that
just the workplace, just in general. I think it's a wider social narrative.
Do you know what I find really interesting is when I was years ago when I was working in the film industry and I was a film student, my one of my fellow students was a young Jewish guy, and for a bit of extra money, we would go and film bar mitzvahs and things like that. And what I really loved about bar mitzvahs, because I had never experienced it in my family culture, was this celebration of somebody entering into
Mhm.
adulthood, and it's a time for that young person, which is very volatile. So for young women, it would be obviously a time where they may have started menstruating, but it's the same for the young males. They are starting their journey just starting their journey into adult life. And it is the celebration is where it's such a beautiful ceremony where every member of the family and every member of their community goes, this is why I love you. And at a time with all those hormonal changes where you're going, I'm not good enough and there's something wrong with me. And I can remember feeling like that as a teenager. And I didn't realize that every other teenager was feeling the same thing at the time. But to have that kind of ceremony and process where it's going, you're embraced and you're loved, I thought it was amazing because
Yes.
it happens for young women by default from entering into that menstruation. It just happens. But for young males, there's not that we've lost that culturally. For a lot of people, we've lost that culturally. So it still exists in the Jewish community. There's ceremony that happens for a lot of indigenous communities for males as well as females. But for a big majority of us, we don't have that kind of ceremony to transition into that phase. So what if we encourage that, but also at the end as well, it will end at the next stage, the next chapter, the
Yes.
last one.
The wisdom years, the power shift, the power
Yeah.
years, the leadership accelerant. It could be a number of ways to term it, but I'm looking forward to it. I think, well, I'm already in it. I feel like there's so much opportunity here. And this conversation needs to continue because I would like to hear more from those in my age group, what they're experiencing, what they would like to be normalized, and what have they experienced as discomfort or this inability to talk about it openly. I want to get around that and just hear from a few more people on what is that experience like and what can we do as a collective. Like, we are voices, Barb, you and I, we love talking to people in the workplace, and we want to bring more inclusion. We want to bring more understanding and acceptance and empowerment into the workplace. And is this a gateway to that? Is this another channel? Because this is affecting leadership, and leadership has so much impact on the entire organization. If we were to celebrate the leadership, and we want to accept and acknowledge that it's our age group that's in leadership roles. I mean, of course, there are younger generations in leadership roles, but like it or not, we are around, and we're going to be around for a lot longer, and we want to continue to contribute. So if that's the case, what can we do to bring out the talents and the strengths and the celebration of what these years mean, instead of keeping it under the rug, or keeping it quiet, or whispering, or having some strange reactions to the words. I want to be in a position where I can normalize it, I can talk about it, and I want to make this a part of the inclusion, diversity, leadership conversation in the workplace.
Yes. And if we think about how leadership has evolved over generations, this stemmed also from all of our generational talk. What leadership looked like 50 years ago is completely different. It was predominantly
Yes,
male in the
yes.
workplace. And so culturally, in terms of workplace culture and culturally, we've had to change in terms of, yes, there are more women in the workforce now. And yes, they deserve equal pay. And yes, some women are going to be navigating pregnancy through the working years. And what does that look like? That didn't exist. That didn't exist 40 or 50 years ago in the way that it does now. And we've had to accommodate, change, celebrate, and embrace that. So now this is the next phase. Cecilia, this is the next phase. Yes, we have women in leadership roles who are menopausal. And what does that look like now?
Yes.
Um, so
Let's
I,
continue this conversation. Yes.
yes, and I want to hear from other women or other people about what their experiences, like you've said, what have been their experiences in the workplace? What did they think could be a way of a new era of accommodating this in the workplace, and what conversations have they had, or what conversations need to be had?
Mm. Well, I can start off with saying that with, I would say 90% of the women that I have talked to, not about menopause, but just about the differences in the workplace, that there is perceived ageism. And I say perceived because I don't know it for a fact. This is just what they're telling me. And I would like to have a discussion around that as well.
And
Is
it
it
goes
linked?
quite
Mm.
possibly. It's also linked in, I mean, there's also the correlation in the reverse. Like we can say, you're too old, you're menopausal. And we've talked about this in terms of generations, where someone can say, oh, you're Gen Z, you're not ready for a leadership role, you're not deserving of it, and you're lazy. All of those ageisms exist. And how do we alleviate that or accommodate that? But that is a whole other topic, right?
Yeah,
All
but
right.
this has been really interesting. And is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I'm good to close out.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about it again next time.